You're not just a deal to me anymore." Adam's words echoed in the silent room, leaving Grace stunned. A contract marriage, nothing more than a business arrangement, or so he thought. As a billionaire CEO, Adam Walker had everything he could ever want, except love. His life was one of control and power, with no room for anything personal or emotional. That is until Grace Miller entered the picture, a woman bound to him by a contractual agreement. She wasn't the glamorous type, at least not in the way Adam's past lovers had been. Grace was different, quiet, reserved, and though she didn't come from wealth, she possessed a strength that was hard to ignore. Adam had signed the papers, sealing their fates with the stroke of a pen. It was supposed to be simple, a mutually beneficial arrangement. He needed to secure his company's legacy, and she needed security for her family. What neither of them expected was how this arrangement would slowly unravel their carefully built walls. Adam never planned on caring for Grace. To him, she was just a piece of the deal. But the more time they spent together, the more Adam started noticing things about her, things he hadn't expected. Her kindness, her intelligence, her quiet strength. Grace, however, was equally torn. She had come to terms with her new reality, but she wasn't sure what to make of the man she now called her husband. Adam's cold demeanor, his distance, and his inability to truly connect with her had always left her questioning why she had agreed to this arrangement. But over time, she began to see the cracks in his armor. He was more than the untouchable billionaire. He had a side that was hidden beneath layers of arrogance and control. And as they began to spend more time together, something changed, something unexpected. It started with small gestures, a kindness here, a look there, but soon, it was undeniable. Adam was starting to care for her, more than he had ever intended. Grace's world, too, was slowly changing. She had never planned on falling in love with a man who had so little regard for her feelings, but as Adam began to reveal more of himself to her, she realized she was beginning to care for him, too. She saw the vulnerability beneath his facade, the loneliness that haunted him. Adam, on the other hand, couldn't deny the growing attraction. He had spent years building his empire, isolating himself from love, but Grace was different. There was something about her that made him want to protect her, something that made him wish they could have a different kind of relationship than the one they'd started with. But how could he go from seeing her as a business partner to a woman he could love? And how would Grace ever trust him enough to let herself fall for him when their marriage was built on lies and cold agreements? It wasn't until one night, when Adam discovered that Grace was a virgin, that everything changed. The revelation rocked him to his core. He had assumed she was just like any other woman he had met, experienced, worldly, but Grace was untouched, pure in a way he hadn't imagined. This discovery shattered all the walls he had built around his heart. It forced him to confront his feelings for her. The woman he had once seen as an obligation now became someone he could see himself with, not just in a contract, but in a real, genuine relationship. And as the truth started to unfold, Adam realized something he had never known before. Love was not a business deal. It was something far deeper, far more complicated, and far more beautiful than he had ever imagined. Grace stood in front of the full-length mirror, adjusting the collar of her blouse. The day had begun like any other. Another busy morning filled with the mundane routine of a contract marriage that was anything but ordinary. She caught her reflection and sighed, still struggling with the complexity of her emotions. Adam had been distant, as he always was, but something had shifted in their relationship. She felt it, even if she couldn't fully explain it. He had started noticing her, in small ways, his gaze lingering a little longer than it should, his voice softer when he spoke to her. It made her nervous, and for the first time in their marriage, she felt the weight of what this contract was truly becoming. But was it real? Could it be? She didn't know how to feel about Adam anymore. A part of her resented him for making her feel like she was just a business arrangement, while another part of her, perhaps the foolish part, longed for something deeper, something more than just the cold facade of their marriage. Adam had made it clear from the start that their marriage was a transaction. She was his wife on paper, but not in any real sense. And now, after that night when she revealed her secret to him, her virginity, Grace wasn't sure what to think. Adam's reaction had been impossible to read. He was surprised, yes, but his usual icy demeanor made it hard to decipher if he felt anything deeper for her. Grace turned away from the mirror and grabbed her purse. She had an important meeting that morning. Adam had asked her to attend one of his corporate events, a gala that would boost his company's image, and she couldn't back out now. Her mind wandered back to the previous night. Adam had been quieter than usual, his thoughts seemingly miles away, but she had caught him looking at her in a way that was completely unfamiliar. It wasn't pity, nor was it disgust. It was something else, something raw and uncertain. She had almost asked him about it, but she held back. Maybe it was too soon. Maybe it was all in her head. But then she couldn't shake the feeling that this contract marriage was about to change, even if neither of them was ready to admit it. Adam had started to show signs of wanting more than just a wife who was bound by legal obligations. And Grace wasn't sure she was ready to give him that. She wasn't sure she could. Adam was a powerful man, used to getting what he wanted, and she wasn't sure if she could ever live up to the expectations he had. She wasn't sure if she could ever be enough. As she stepped out of her apartment and into the elevator, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Adam. "I'll pick you up at 6 p.m. for the gala. Don't be late." It was short, direct, and businesslike, as usual. But there was a hint of something more in the way he signed off, Adam, instead of Mr. Walker. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but to Grace, it felt like a crack in the wall he had built around himself. She stared at the message, uncertain of what it meant, but feeling a flutter of something deep within her. The day passed slowly, and by the time the evening rolled around, Grace had convinced herself that she was overthinking everything. She was just a part of the deal. She would go to the gala, smile, and play her role. But when Adam arrived at her door, looking every bit the part of a wealthy CEO in his tailored suit, something shifted. He looked at her, his eyes softening for just a moment, before he quickly masked it with his usual calm. "Ready?" he asked, his voice steady, but with a hint of something she couldn't quite place. Grace nodded, her heart racing despite herself. "Yes," she said, her voice a little breathless. Adam smiled, a brief, almost unguarded smile, before he turned to lead her out of the apartment. As they stepped into the car, the atmosphere between them felt different, charged with an energy neither of them had ever acknowledged before. Grace didn't know what to expect that night, but as the car sped toward the gala, she realized that whatever it was, things between them would never be the same again. The gala was in full swing, the ballroom glittering under the grand chandeliers, filled with the chatter of the city's elite. Grace entered the room beside Adam, feeling like a stranger in a world she didn't belong to. The designer dress she wore felt stiff and foreign, and despite the glamour, she couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider. She glanced up at Adam, who moved confidently through the crowd, his every step measured, his presence commanding. He was in his element, at ease, surrounded by colleagues, business partners, and the occasional well-wisher. He glanced back at Grace, catching her gaze for a moment, but it was brief, impersonal. "Just smile and nod," he had told her when they arrived. And that's exactly what she did. She smiled at the people who greeted her, shaking hands and making polite conversation, but her mind kept wandering back to the feeling she had when Adam had looked at her earlier. There was something there, something different. But what was it? Adam was distant as always, yet she sensed a subtle shift in the way he interacted with her. There was an unspoken tension between them, an awareness that neither of them had addressed. Grace felt herself growing more self-conscious with every passing minute, her eyes scanning the room as if looking for a reason to escape, but she didn't dare leave his side. This was her life now, and as much as she tried to push it out of her mind, she couldn't ignore the undeniable chemistry that was building between them. She had never expected this, certainly not after everything that had happened between them. Adam had started to change, and she wasn't sure how to navigate it. The evening wore on, and the crowd thickened as the night unfolded, but Grace couldn't shake the feeling that the night was more than just a corporate event for her. It felt like a turning point. As the night wore on, Adam finally turned to her. His expression had softened, his usual walls lowered just a bit. He pulled her aside to a quieter corner of the room, away from the noise and the constant stream of handshakes and introductions. For the first time that evening, he seemed to look at her not as his wife in a contract, but as a person. "Grace, there's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice low, just loud enough to cut through the noise of the ballroom. She tilted her head, confused, but nodded, waiting for him to continue. His eyes were searching, almost apologetic. "I've been thinking about our arrangement," he began, his voice laced with hesitation. Grace felt a flutter in her chest, unsure of what he meant, but before she could respond, Adam continued, I never intended for this to go beyond what we agreed on, but lately, things have changed. I don't know what it is, but I can't stop thinking about you. Her heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure if she had heard him correctly. Adam, you don't have to, she started, but he interrupted her, his voice growing more earnest. No, Grace, I do. I do have to say this. I've treated you like a business arrangement, and that's not fair. I was wrong to think that way. Grace's breath caught in her throat. The words she had waited to hear for so long, words she never thought would come, were finally being spoken. For a moment, she was silent, absorbing the weight of his confession. This wasn't the man she had married. This was someone different, someone real, someone vulnerable. Her mind raced as she tried to process what this meant for them. Could they truly be more than just a contract? Could she trust him, despite everything that had happened? She didn't know. But, for the first time, she felt like she was looking at Adam in a new light. I don't know where this is going, Grace, Adam said, his voice softer now, but I can't ignore what's between us anymore. I want to try to make this work. With you. As more than just a business deal. Grace felt her heart swell with emotion, the walls she had built around herself beginning to crumble. This was the man she had hoped for, the man she had wished would one day see her as more than just a formality in his life. And in that moment, she realized she had been waiting for him to say this all along. But what came next? Could they move past their past mistakes and build something real, something lasting? Or was this just another fleeting moment of hope, one that would eventually fade away? The music swelled in the background as the two stood in the quiet corner, facing the unknown together. Neither of them had the answers, but for the first time, they were willing to find them. Together. The days following the gala felt different. Grace couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between her and Adam, but she wasn't sure how to define it. The way he looked at her now was different. There was a softness in his eyes, a tenderness she hadn't seen before, and it unsettled her. She had spent so long building walls around herself, protecting her heart, that now, the idea of letting someone in felt like an overwhelming risk. But what if Adam really meant it? What if this wasn't just another fleeting moment of uncertainty that would eventually fade, like everything else in her life? She found herself thinking about him more than she ever had. The way he'd confessed, the way he spoke about wanting to make their marriage work. It was all so unexpected, so out of the blue. She had spent the last year keeping herself distant, accepting the arrangement as it was. It was a contract, nothing more. But now, the lines were blurred, and Grace didn't know how to handle it. She couldn't help but wonder if Adam had been going through the same internal battle. He had been distant for so long, almost emotionless, but now it seemed like he was opening up, like he wanted more. Grace tried to focus on her work during the day, but her thoughts kept drifting to him. Every conversation they had now felt different, like there was something more beneath the surface. She couldn't help but be cautious. Her heart had been bruised before, and she wasn't sure she was ready to face the possibility of it happening again. As the days passed, Adam kept his distance in public, but showed subtle signs of his growing affection when they were alone. He would leave her little notes around the house, simple messages like, "Have a good day," or "I'm thinking about you." And each time, Grace felt a flutter in her chest. She had never been one to shy away from affection, but this was different. This wasn't the kind of attention she had expected from him. It was genuine, raw, and it scared her. Adam's demeanor shifted as well. He started being more present in their conversations, asking about her day, making small talk that didn't feel like business. He had even asked her opinions on some of his company's projects, something he'd never done before. It was like he was finally seeing her, not just as a contract partner, but as an individual, someone with her own ideas, her own worth. And it was terrifying. Grace had never asked for any of this. She had never expected to be more than a convenient partner in a business arrangement. But now, with Adam slowly starting to open up, she wasn't sure where she stood. Was this just his way of fulfilling his obligation, or was he really falling for her? One evening, they sat together on the couch, a silence hanging between them as the glow of the fireplace flickered. Grace could feel the weight of his gaze, but she didn't look at him. She was afraid of what she might see. Adam finally broke the silence. "Grace," he said quietly, his voice almost tentative. She turned to him, meeting his gaze, and for the first time, she saw vulnerability in his eyes. I know I've been distant, and I know I've treated you like this was just a contract. But it's not like that anymore. I need you to know that. Grace's heart skipped a beat. She opened her mouth to respond, but words failed her. She had waited so long for him to say something like this, yet now that it was happening, she didn't know how to react. Was he really speaking from the heart? Or was this just another phase he was going through? I want more, Grace. I want to know you. I want to be with you. Adam continued, his voice steady now, more confident. Not because of the contract, but because of you. His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Grace stared at him, trying to process everything. She had been so guarded, so unsure of where they were headed. But now, hearing him speak so openly, something inside her shifted. She couldn't deny that she had begun to care for him too, in a way she never expected. But could she trust him? Could she trust this newfound honesty between them? I don't know if I can believe you, Grace whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I don't know if I can let myself believe in this. Adam reached for her hand, gently squeezing it. I understand, Grace. But I want to try. I'm willing to take the risk if you are. For the first time since their marriage began, Grace saw Adam not just as the man who held all the power, but as someone who was willing to be vulnerable, to risk everything for something real. And in that moment, a part of her wanted to take that risk with him. But the fear still lingered, lingering just under the surface, threatening to pull her back. Grace sat in silence, looking down at their joined hands, wondering what the future would hold for them both. Days passed, and the tension between Adam and Grace seemed to both dissolve and intensify. The moments of quiet understanding they had shared after their conversation were often interrupted by doubt and hesitation. Adam had opened up, showing a side of himself that Grace had never thought possible, but she found herself unable to let go of the uncertainty. Could she really trust him? Could he truly love her beyond their arrangement, beyond the contract they had signed so many months ago? The walls she had carefully constructed around her heart had been slowly crumbling, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for that kind of vulnerability. Adam, on the other hand, seemed more determined than ever to prove that he wasn't just the cold, distant businessman she had first met. He made an effort to be present, to be more than just a figurehead in her life. The small gestures mattered. The text messages that arrived throughout the day, the times he checked in with her, asked her opinions on things that weren't just related to his company. It was clear that Adam was trying to bridge the gap between them, but there were still moments of hesitation. Moments where he pulled back, as if unsure of how far he could go, afraid of losing control. But Grace was learning to see through the layers he had built around himself. She began to notice how much he really did care. She noticed the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't looking, how his eyes softened when she spoke about something she was passionate about. The more time they spent together, the more Grace realized that Adam wasn't just the CEO with a cold exterior. He was someone with depth, with vulnerability, someone who had been hurt in the past, just like her. As much as she wanted to push him away, a part of her longed to be close to him. But she wasn't ready. She wasn't ready to let go of the fear, of the doubts that still lingered. The past had shaped her, and trust didn't come easily. That night, as they sat in their living room, Grace felt a shift in the air. Adam had been quieter than usual, staring out the window at the city lights. She had been reading, but the silence between them felt thick, heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Adam spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Grace, I know you're still unsure. I can see it in your eyes. And I can't force you to trust me. But I want you to know, I'm here. For you. Not because of the contract. Not because of anything other than you. Grace didn't know what to say. His words were sincere, but she was still afraid. Afraid of getting hurt. Afraid of falling for someone who might not feel the same. She had to fight the urge to pull away, to protect herself from the pain that might come with giving in to him. But then she looked at him, really looked at him, and she saw the honesty in his eyes. For the first time, she saw the man behind the suit, the man who was vulnerable, who had flaws, and who was willing to expose those flaws to her. It was a terrifying feeling, but it was also liberating. I don't know what to say, Adam, she said softly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. I don't know if I'm ready for this. Adam turned to her, his expression softening. You don't have to say anything right now, but I want you to know that I'm willing to take it slow, however long it takes. I'm not going anywhere. The weight of his words settled in Grace's chest. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust that this wasn't just another fleeting moment, another promise that would be broken. But she wasn't sure if she could. She had been let down too many times before. Yet, for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to entertain the possibility that this could be different, that Adam could be different. And as the evening wore on, the quiet tension between them began to soften. The space between them was still there, but it no longer felt insurmountable. Grace didn't know where this journey would lead, but for the first time, she was willing to take a step forward. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't alone in this anymore. Grace sat in the quiet of her bedroom, the soft light of the afternoon filtering through the curtains. It had been a few weeks since the gala, and while the tension between her and Adam had softened, the uncertainty still lingered. She couldn't help but wonder what it all meant. Adam had been more present, more engaged, but she wasn't sure if it was real or just another attempt to fulfill some unspoken duty. The distance between them had been slowly closing, but each step forward felt like a leap of faith. Grace didn't know if she was ready to jump. She had been hurt before, and trusting someone felt like an impossible task. The door to the room creaked open, and Adam's figure filled the doorway. His presence was unmistakable, his confident posture still a little intimidating, but there was a softness to him now. He wasn't the same man she had first met, the cold, calculated CEO. He had changed, but Grace wasn't sure if it was for the better. "Grace," Adam began, his voice hesitant, "I need to talk to you." Grace's heart skipped a beat. She had been expecting this conversation, but she wasn't sure she was ready for it. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Adam walked into the room, his gaze softening as he looked at her. "I've been thinking about us, about what we're doing here. I know I've treated you like an obligation, but I don't want to keep doing that. I don't want to keep pretending that this is just some business arrangement." Grace held her breath, unsure of how to respond. Was this real? Was Adam truly telling her how he felt? She wanted to believe him, but doubt still held her back. "You don't have to do this," she said, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "You don't have to pretend that this is more than it is." Adam stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm not pretending, Grace. I know this started as a contract, but I can't keep living in a lie. I care about you. I care about what we have. I don't want to be just your husband in name." Grace swallowed hard, her emotions swirling. She had always kept her heart guarded, but Adam's words made her question everything. Could she really let herself believe in this? Could she trust him with her heart? "I don't know if I can believe you," she whispered. "I don't know if I can let myself believe in this marriage." Adam's face softened with a mixture of sadness and determination. "I understand, Grace. I know I've made mistakes, but I'm willing to try. I want to prove to you that I'm serious. I want to build something real with you. Not because of the contract, but because I care about you." Grace looked down at her hands, her fingers fidgeting nervously. She had always been cautious about love, always afraid of getting hurt. But Adam's words were different. They weren't just words, they were a promise. A promise that he was willing to take a chance, to be vulnerable, to be real with her. "I don't know what this is, Adam," Grace said softly, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I'm ready to trust you. But—" She paused, her heart racing. "But maybe, just maybe, we could try." Adam smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "That's all I'm asking for, Grace. A chance." For the first time in what felt like forever, Grace felt a flicker of hope. It was small, but it was there. She didn't know what the future held, but in this moment, she felt like she was ready to take that leap of faith. Maybe love wasn't as impossible as she had always believed. Maybe it was worth the risk. As Adam stepped closer and took her hand, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could build something real, something beautiful. Together. The days after their conversation were a whirlwind of emotions, and neither Adam nor Grace knew how to navigate the changes between them. The air between them was thick with unspoken words, with both of them trying to process everything that had been said. Adam, despite his usual self-assurance, found himself lost in thought, questioning his intentions and his feelings for Grace. He had spent so long pushing away any notion of love, building walls around his heart, and now, in the face of Grace's quiet vulnerability, he was forced to confront something he had never expected, his own capacity for love. But with that realization came a fear that he hadn't anticipated. What if it was too late? What if Grace couldn't see him the way he now saw her? For so long, she had been nothing more than a business arrangement in his eyes. How could he convince her that he had changed? Grace, on the other hand, was equally confused. She had spent the majority of her life protecting herself, guarding her heart against the possibility of getting hurt. She had never imagined that she would fall for a man like Adam, someone so driven by ambition and power. Yet, here she was, standing on the edge of something that could either break her or change her forever. She wanted to believe in him, wanted to believe that his feelings were genuine, but the walls she had built around her heart were not so easily torn down. Every time she thought about trusting him, doubt crept in. What if he was only doing this because he felt obligated, because he thought he had to? What if, in the end, their marriage would still be nothing more than a contract, one that could be broken at any time? Despite the uncertainty, they found themselves spending more time together. Adam would make the effort to ask her about her day, about her thoughts on different matters, and Grace found herself opening up in ways she hadn't before. There were moments, fleeting but significant, when she caught glimpses of the man behind the suit, the man who was just as uncertain and vulnerable as she was. One evening, Adam invited her to join him for dinner outside of their usual routine. It was something that felt both normal and surreal at the same time. She had never been out on a real date with him, and yet, in some strange way, this felt like the first time they were really seeing each other. The restaurant was quiet, intimate, with dim lighting and soft music playing in the background. Adam was more relaxed than she had ever seen him. His usual sharp demeanor softened as he asked her questions about herself, about her life before their marriage. She found herself laughing, something that hadn't happened often in their time together, and for a moment, she allowed herself to enjoy the simplicity of the evening. As they shared their meal, Adam reached across the table and took her hand, an unexpected gesture that made her heart flutter. "I'm not asking you to trust me overnight, Grace," Adam said softly, his voice carrying a weight of sincerity that she hadn't heard before. "But I want you to know that I'm here for you. I want to be here for you, not just because we signed a contract, but because I care about you. And I want to make this work, however long it takes." Grace met his gaze, searching his eyes for any trace of insincerity, but there was nothing there but honesty. It was a lot to take in, but she couldn't deny the impact his words had on her. She had never heard him speak like this before. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he was telling the truth. "I want to believe you," Grace said quietly, her voice full of emotion. "I really do. But I'm scared." Adam squeezed her hand gently, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "I know, and I'm not going anywhere. We'll take this one step at a time, okay?" Grace nodded, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she could breathe. The uncertainty wasn't gone, but the fear wasn't as suffocating as it had been before. They didn't have all the answers, but in that moment, they had each other. And for the first time, Grace believed that maybe that was enough. As they finished their meal and walked out of the restaurant together, the world felt a little different. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, they were both willing to take it on together, one step at a time. The days following their conversation felt like a delicate balancing act. Adam and Grace had made progress, but the space between them was still filled with uncertainty. While they had both committed to taking things one step at a time, the weight of their past still lingered. Grace had been trying to let go of her doubts, trying to trust that Adam's feelings were real, but it was harder than she expected. Every time she thought she had moved forward, something would remind her of the walls she had built over the years. She wasn't sure if she could let them crumble completely. Adam, on the other hand, had been nothing but patient. He had been doing everything in his power to show her that he wasn't the man she had initially married, the cold businessman who had treated her like an obligation. But he was aware of the pain he had caused, and he couldn't undo the past. All he could do now was prove to her that he was willing to change. The small gestures were there, taking her hand in public, asking her about her day, showing interest in her life beyond the surface. But it was still a delicate dance. The intimacy they had shared that evening at the restaurant remained in the back of Grace's mind, but she wasn't sure how to move forward from it. Was it enough? Could they really build something beyond the confines of their contract? That evening, Adam invited Grace to another dinner, this time at a quieter spot, a place where they could talk without the distractions of the world around them. Grace agreed, unsure of what to expect, but willing to try. The atmosphere was intimate, the lighting soft and warm, the soft murmur of conversations from other tables fading into the background. Adam looked at her across the table, his expression calm, but there was a hint of something more, something deeper. "Grace," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion, "I know this isn't easy. I know I've made mistakes, and I know I've hurt you in ways I can never take back. But I want you to know that I'm trying. I'm trying to be the man you deserve." Grace felt a lump form in her throat. She had heard those words before, but this time, they felt different. There was no arrogance in his voice, no hidden agenda, just sincerity. She looked down at her plate, her fingers tracing the edge of the glass in front of her. "I don't know if I can trust you, Adam," she admitted quietly. "I don't know if I can let go of the past." Adam leaned forward slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. "I don't expect you to forgive me overnight, Grace. I don't expect everything to be perfect, but I want to prove to you that I'm here for you, that I'm here for us." The words lingered in the air, and Grace felt her walls start to crack, just a little. She had spent so long protecting herself from the possibility of being hurt again, but now, with Adam's vulnerability laid bare, she found herself questioning everything. Was it possible for them to rebuild from where they started? Was it possible for them to create something real? "I want to believe you," Grace said, her voice barely a whisper. "But I don't know how." Adam reached across the table, his hand hovering over hers. "You don't have to have all the answers, Grace," he said softly. "You just have to take a chance. Let me show you what we can be together. Let me prove that this is worth fighting for." The sincerity in his voice, the way he held her gaze, made Grace's heart race. For the first time in a long while, she felt the weight of her fear begin to lift. She didn't have all the answers, and she didn't know what the future held. But in that moment, with Adam's hand gently touching hers, she realized that maybe, just maybe, they could build something real. It wasn't going to be easy. There would be challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But for the first time, Grace was willing to believe that maybe it was worth the risk. They didn't have to be perfect. They just had to be willing to try. And in that quiet moment, sitting across from Adam, she decided to take that first step. She was ready to let go of the past, to let herself believe in the possibility of a future with him. Together, the days that followed their heartfelt conversation were filled with moments of uncertainty, yet a quiet optimism began to grow between Adam and Grace. They had agreed to take things slow, to rebuild their relationship without the pressure of expectations. Grace found herself looking at Adam differently. The man who had once seemed so distant and cold was now showing a side of himself she had never seen before. There were small things that mattered. His thoughtful gestures, the way he asked about her day, the way he looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. Grace couldn't deny that something was changing, but she was still hesitant to fully embrace it. She had spent so long building walls around her heart, walls that she was afraid would crumble if she let her guard down. Adam, on the other hand, seemed more determined than ever. He was no longer the man who had kept everything at arm's length. He was trying to show Grace that he was more than just the successful CEO he had built himself to be. The process was slow, but with each passing day, he felt himself falling deeper into something he never thought possible: love. He hadn't planned on it. He hadn't expected it. But it was there, and it was real. One evening, they sat together in the living room, the soft glow of the fireplace casting a warm light over their faces. It was one of those rare moments where the world seemed to slow down. There were no demands, no contracts, just the two of them in the quiet of their shared space. Adam reached for her hand, his fingers lightly brushing against hers. She looked at him, a mix of uncertainty and hope in her eyes. "Grace," he said, his voice steady, "I want to make this work. I know it's been hard. I know I've hurt you, but I'm not going to stop trying." Grace felt her chest tighten. She wasn't sure if she could fully let go of the past, but in that moment, Adam's words, his sincerity, were undeniable. She had spent so long protecting herself, but here he was, vulnerable in a way she had never expected. He wasn't perfect, but neither was she. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. "I don't know what's going to happen, Adam," Grace whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "But I'm willing to try too." Adam's eyes softened, and for the first time in a long while, Grace saw the man who had been buried beneath the layers of power and responsibility. The man who had been afraid of love, but who was now willing to take a chance. "That's all I'm asking for, Grace," he said, his voice low and sincere. "A chance." She nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. They didn't have all the answers, but in that moment, they both understood that they were willing to take the next step together. It wasn't going to be easy, and the road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, Grace felt like they were on the same page. They didn't have to be perfect. They didn't have to have everything figured out. All they had to do was keep moving forward, one step at a time. As the evening drew to a close, they sat in silence, the warmth of the fire between them, and for the first time in their marriage, it felt like they were truly together. The world outside could wait. They had each other, and that was all that mattered. Grace had always been afraid of taking risks, of opening herself up to someone else. But now, with Adam by her side, she realized that maybe love wasn't as terrifying as she had once thought. It was a risk, yes, but it was one she was willing to take. For the first time, Grace allowed herself to believe that they could build something real, something lasting, together. As the weeks passed, the shift in Adam and Grace's relationship became undeniable. The walls between them had slowly come down, brick by brick, with each passing conversation, each small gesture of affection. Adam had been doing everything in his power to show Grace that he wasn't the same man who had treated her like an obligation. He was making an effort, not just in their marriage but in his life, in how he approached his feelings for her. Grace noticed it. She saw how he was trying to prove that his feelings weren't just words. He would surprise her with dinner plans, ask about her day in ways that felt genuine, and spend time with her outside of the responsibilities they shared as husband and wife. But despite the progress they had made, there was still a lingering doubt in Grace's heart. Could she truly trust him? Could she believe that this wasn't just a temporary shift, a fleeting moment in a marriage that started out as a contract? She had been hurt before, and opening up to Adam wasn't easy. But as time passed, she began to realize something she had been too afraid to admit before. She was starting to fall for him. The idea of trusting him, of letting him into her heart fully, terrified her. What if she gave him everything, only for him to turn away again? But in those quiet moments when it was just the two of them, she found herself wondering if maybe, just maybe, she had been wrong to doubt him. One evening, Adam invited her to a small cafe, one they had passed several times but never entered. It was a place that seemed different from the usual spots they visited, cozy, intimate, and far from the bustling crowd they were used to. Grace had agreed, her heart still unsure, but willing to take the step. As they sat at a small table, Adam looked at her across the candlelit space, his gaze softer than usual. "Grace," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "I know we've come a long way, and I know that it hasn't been easy for either of us. But I need you to understand that I'm here. I'm here because I want this. I want us." Grace's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected this kind of vulnerability from him, especially not in public. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, and for the first time, the uncertainty in her heart started to waver. But still, she hesitated. "You don't have to do this, Adam," she said quietly, unsure of how to respond. "You don't have to try so hard. We both know what this started as." Adam's expression shifted, a trace of sadness in his eyes. "I know," he said softly, "but this isn't just about the contract anymore, Grace. It's about us." "About what?" "We're building together. I never wanted to be the kind of man who let his guard down, but you've made me realize that it's worth it. Worth taking the risk." Grace felt her heart swell with conflicting emotions. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust that this wasn't just another moment of him fulfilling his obligations. But a part of her was still unsure, still afraid of being let down. "I don't know, Adam," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "I want to believe in this, but it's hard for me to let go of everything we've been through." Adam reached across the table, his hand gently covering hers. The simple gesture was enough to stop her racing thoughts for a moment. "Grace," he said quietly, "I can't promise that everything will be perfect, but I can promise that I'll keep trying. I'll keep showing up for you, for us." She looked at him, and for the first time, she realized just how much he truly cared. It wasn't about the contract. It wasn't about the business. It was about something deeper, something real. She didn't know if she was ready to fully let go of her doubts, but in that moment, she realized that maybe the only way to move forward was to take the leap. "Okay," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Okay, let's try. Let's take this one step at a time. Adam smiled, his eyes bright with relief and hope. The weight that had been hanging over them both seemed to lift, and in its place, there was a new sense of possibility. They didn't have all the answers, and they weren't perfect. But they had each other, and for the first time, Grace felt like that was enough. They had made it this far, and they were willing to keep going, together. The weeks continued to pass, and Adam and Grace's connection grew stronger with each day. It wasn't just the big moments, those moments that took them by surprise, like the soft looks, the quiet conversations, or the times Adam would open up in ways he never had before. It was the small things. The way he made sure to ask about her day when she got home. The way he listened intently when she talked about her passions, her fears, her hopes for the future. Adam was there, truly. There in ways she had never expected. Grace was starting to feel something for him. Something real. Something that had been buried under layers of distrust and fear for so long. But still, a part of her hesitated. Could she trust that this was more than just an experiment? More than just him trying to fulfill an obligation? Could she let go of her fears and allow herself to be loved? It was a terrifying thought. Grace had been protecting herself for so long, afraid that opening up would only lead to heartbreak. But Adam was showing her, day by day, that maybe love was worth the risk. One evening, after a long day of work, Grace returned home to find Adam already there, waiting for her. The house was quiet, and the soft glow of the kitchen light illuminated his figure as he stood at the stove, cooking dinner. It was a simple gesture, but it was enough to make her heart swell. Adam had always been driven by his work, his company, but now, he was taking time out of his day to make her dinner, to spend time with her. It felt real. Dinner's almost ready, Adam said as she walked into the kitchen, a warm smile on his face. I thought you might be hungry. Grace smiled back, her heart feeling lighter than it had in a long time. You didn't have to do this, she said, her voice soft but filled with warmth. I could have ordered takeout or something. I wanted to, Adam replied simply, turning to face her. I've realized that I want to do things for you. Things that show I'm not just here because of the contract. I'm here because I care about you. Grace felt a lump form in her throat. She hadn't expected those words, hadn't expected him to say what she had been afraid to admit to herself. For a moment, they just stood there, looking at each other. The world outside felt distant, like it didn't matter anymore. It was just the two of them, in this quiet moment, and for the first time, Grace allowed herself to truly feel the weight of the bond they were building. Adam reached for her hand, his touch gentle but firm. Grace, he said, his voice low, I know I've hurt you in the past, and I can't undo that. But I want to be the man you need, the man you deserve. Grace's heart fluttered, and she took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. I don't know if I can trust you completely yet, she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. But I want to believe in us. I want to believe that we can build something real, something lasting. Adam's expression softened, and he pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her. We'll take it one step at a time, he said, his voice warm and reassuring. No pressure, no expectations. Just us, moving forward together. In that moment, Grace felt something shift inside her. The fear, the doubts, the uncertainty that had weighed so heavily on her heart. It was all still there, but it didn't feel as suffocating as it had before. For the first time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could open up to Adam, she could let him in. Maybe she wasn't ready to give him everything, but she was willing to take the first step. Adam wasn't asking for perfection. He wasn't asking for her to let go of everything overnight. He was asking for the chance to try, for the chance to prove that he could be the man she needed. And for the first time, Grace was willing to give him that chance. As they sat down to dinner, the conversation flowed easily, and the silence between them no longer felt heavy. They were moving forward, not as two people bound by a contract, but as two people learning to trust and care for each other. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for the first time in their marriage, it felt like they were building something worth fighting for. The atmosphere in their home had shifted. The tension that once filled every room had softened, replaced by a quiet understanding between Adam and Grace. They had reached a delicate balance, one where trust was slowly taking root, despite the years of distance between them. Adam had proven, time and again, that his feelings were genuine. His actions, his words, all aligned with what he had promised her. He wanted to build something real, something lasting. Grace, too, had started to open up. Slowly, but surely, the walls she had built around her heart began to crack. She had never imagined that she could let someone in so deeply again. Adam had done something she hadn't expected. He had given her space, but also made it clear that he was there for her, no matter what. It was in the small, everyday moments that she saw him the most. It was in the way he would hold her hand, the way he would check in with her after a long day, the way he truly listened when she spoke. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying, and that was enough for her to take another step forward. It wasn't easy for Grace to fully let go of her doubts. There were moments when the past came rushing back, memories of being hurt, of feeling abandoned, but she knew now that she couldn't let those past fears dictate her future. Adam had shown her that he was willing to take risks for their relationship, and now, she had to do the same. One evening, after a long day of work, Grace found Adam sitting in the living room, reading through some documents. His face was furrowed in concentration, but when he saw her enter, he set the papers down and smiled at her. It was a warm, genuine smile, and for the first time in a long time, Grace felt the walls between them dissolve completely. She walked over and sat beside him, feeling the familiar sense of peace that had been growing between them. "How was your day?" Adam asked, his voice soft, yet full of concern. Grace smiled, shrugging slightly. "It was fine. Busy, as usual, but nothing I couldn't handle." Adam leaned back, stretching his arms. "I'm glad to hear that. I know you've been working hard, and I just want to make sure you're okay." Grace looked at him, her heart swelling. It was moments like this that made her realize how far they had come. "I'm okay," she said quietly. "More than okay, actually." Adam's eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, the weight of everything they had been through hung in the air between them. But instead of feeling overwhelming, it felt like a moment of connection, of shared understanding. Grace took a deep breath, her fingers playing with the edge of her sleeve. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice hesitant but steady. "About us. About everything." Adam's expression softened, and he reached for her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "What are you thinking?" he asked, his voice full of curiosity. "I'm thinking that maybe I've been too afraid to really believe in us," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've spent so much time protecting myself, building walls, that I didn't give us a real chance. But now, after everything, I think I'm ready." Adam's heart raced as he processed her words. He had waited so long for this, for Grace to see what he had already known. She was ready to take the leap, to trust him fully. And in that moment, Adam knew that he was ready to take that leap with her, too. He leaned in slightly, his face inches from hers, his eyes searching hers for any trace of hesitation. "Grace," he said, his voice low and earnest, "I know I can't change the past, but I want you to know that I'm here. I'm here for the long haul. I'm ready to build something real with you, if you'll let me." Grace's heart fluttered as she looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity, the depth of emotion behind his words. She had been afraid for so long, but now, with Adam's unwavering commitment, she felt the fear begin to dissipate. She was ready, and so was he. "I'm ready, too," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Adam smiled, his relief palpable. He pulled her into a gentle embrace, holding her close as if he never wanted to let go. In that moment, Grace knew that they had crossed a line that had once seemed impossible to cross. But they had done it together, and for the first time, Grace believed that maybe, just maybe, they had a chance at something beautiful. As they held each other, the world outside felt a little less daunting. They weren't perfect, and they didn't have all the answers, but they had each other, and that was enough. Together, they would face whatever came next, and Grace knew that with Adam by her side, they could overcome anything. As the months passed, Adam and Grace settled into a rhythm, a quiet understanding that had grown between them like a new foundation being laid brick by brick. Their marriage, once a cold business arrangement, had transformed into something neither of them had anticipated. They weren't perfect, but they were real. They spent time together, not just out of duty, but out of choice. Grace had started to open up in ways she hadn't before, and Adam, the once distant CEO, had learned to be vulnerable with her. Their connection deepened, the trust that had been so fragile now becoming a strong thread that held them together. Adam had finally learned how to be present, to listen, to care. Grace, in turn, had learned how to trust again, how to let go of the walls she had built to protect herself from being hurt. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony of their home, watching the sun set over the city, Grace felt a sense of peace she had never known before. The wind tugged at her hair, but she didn't mind. Adam sat beside her, his presence comforting, like an anchor in a sea of uncertainty. He had his arm around her shoulders, and for the first time, there was no fear, no doubt in her heart. She leaned her head against him, her eyes closing for a moment as she took in the quiet sounds of the evening. "You know, I never imagined we'd end up here," Grace said softly, her voice carrying a weight of emotion. "Not like this." Adam's gaze softened as he looked at her, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Neither did I," he admitted, his voice full of sincerity. "I didn't expect this. I didn't expect you." Grace turned to look at him, her heart swelling with emotions she had spent so long hiding. "I didn't think I could trust you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But now, I can't imagine my life without you." Adam gently took her hand, his thumb brushing over her fingers. "I can't imagine mine without you either, Grace. You've changed me. You've made me want more than I ever thought possible." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared history between them. It hadn't been easy. There had been moments of doubt, moments where the walls almost went back up, but they had made it through. Together. "What do you think happens now?" Grace asked, her voice full of curiosity and a touch of hope. Adam looked out at the horizon, the city lights twinkling below. He thought about everything that had brought them here, the contract, the misunderstandings, the fears, and everything they had overcome. "I think we just keep going," he said, his voice steady. "One step at a time. Together." Grace nodded, her heart feeling lighter than it had in months. "I like the sound of that," she said, her voice filled with a quiet certainty. They sat together for a while longer, watching the stars appear in the sky, feeling like, for the first time, they were exactly where they were meant to be. The road ahead was still unknown, but Grace no longer felt afraid of it. With Adam by her side, she knew they could face anything that came their way. They had already proven that love, trust, and vulnerability could turn what had started as a contract into something real and lasting. And no matter what the future held, they were ready to face it together.